Welcome back to Firefly Studios. My name is Kadia, and today we are going to be answering a viewer question. In this case, the viewer wanted to know how to make an animated menu, as well as how to do a chain or rope animation. So in this case, we've got it set up, so if we click our button, we'll load our level, and we can play. So let's get right into it. So this is somewhat complicated. I'd say it's maybe like intermediate level. So we're going to go through it in sections. First, we're going to focus on how to set up the chain. So the way you do that, you're going to need to create whatever art you want to create for your chain. For me, I created a chain ring like this, and then I made my sign in my image editing software with the text attached to it. So the way our chain is set up, this uses a physics and the hinge joint component in order to make it work. So what we're going to do is create another version of it, just mimicking what we have here, so you can see it step by step. So the first step is we're going to create an empty game object, and we'll call this chain. I'm going to call mine chain 2, because I already created a chain. And I'll move this up over here. Then what we're going to do is we're going to create our chain mount component. So this is going to be another empty game object. So I'll just call this mount. And then this component is going to have a rigid body 2D on it that is set to kinematic. And then it is also going to have your capsule collider on it. And this mount is going to be where the chain is affixed to. Because of that, it's kinematic. That's the reason for it. Physics knows that it's there, but won't act upon it. I'm going to go ahead and give this a tag so we can see it. All right, the next step is we need to make our links. So we're going to, once again, create an empty, and we'll call this link. And this link is going to have a sprite renderer on it. That's going to be one of our chain links. So I will just select one of my links from the list. Then it is additionally going to have a hinge joint 2D. And this is automatically going to add your rigid body 2D. You can leave your rigid body settings the same for this. For this first link, we are going to want to uncheck our auto configure connected anchor checkbox right here. I'm going to zoom in on it a little bit. That has to do with this green circle and that blue dot in the center. You can click on this button right here to change the location of our link. In our case, we're going to keep it the same. The other thing we're going to want to do is we are going to want to use angular limits. And we're going to limit this to negative 7.5 to positive 7.5. You can play around with these values. These are the values that work for me. And you can see how this narrowed this green line. So what this is going to do is it going to give it a total of 15 degrees of rotation that it can move along. Let me just double check right here to see if there's anything else we need to add. We will need to add our capsule collider to this as well. So we'll just add a capsule collider 2D, and then we'll move on to the next one. So we're going to duplicate this link. We're going to move this link down, and then we're going to change a couple things about it. We do want to collect auto configure connected anchor, and then we can increase this rate of movement. For me, I changed that one to 15 by 15. And then we need to specify our connected rigid body. So our link 1 is going to go to the thing above it. In our case, that is link. And then our link is going to go to the thing above that, which is mount. Now that looks a little strange, so I'm going to compare it. We will have to adjust for our link 1 where this is located. So we can do that by clicking the button, or I can just type it in because I know it's going to be 0, 0. But you can click the button here and drag it to where you want it to be. So they are just out of sync with each other. So you want that to be directly mounted on our mount object. I just nudged my touchpad and that's how I clicked there. All right, then you're going to duplicate your link for however many links you want. I'm going to have, let's do like total of 4 links. And then you're going to have to go to each of these and make sure that the connected rigid body is updated. So link 2 is going to have link 1, link 3 is going to have link 2 there. And I'm just going to go through and double check that all those are correct. All those are in fact correct. Then we're going to create an empty game object for our sign. So I'm going to create another empty. We're going to call this one sign. And now this is going to get a hinge joint. So by fact, also a rigid body. It's also going to get another type of joint. This is going to be a distance joint. And what the distance joint does is it attempts to keep an object within a certain distance from the point. This is going to help keep it from getting too far away. So for a hinge joint, we will auto configure it. So we will make sure that is checked. We will set its parent to be link 3. We will change its limits as well. I'm going to keep this one at -30 by 30 just for experimentation. Oh, I believe I found -7.5 and -7.5 worked well on the last one. So I'll just copy those over. These you just kind of have to experiment till you get the feel that you want to have. I'm going to set that to 0. Alrighty. And then our next thing is our distant joint needs to know what we want to be distant from. In our case, it's going to be this guy down here. And then we need to check use limits. Otherwise, our limits aren't going to do anything. We want to do this for all of our guys. So we want to make sure that this use limits is checked. And you can see how each of these have a limit select like indicator here, this gizmo indicating their limits. All right, let me just compare to see if there's anything else. We need our collider on it, and we are going to change the weight of it. So we are going to add a box collider on it. Right now, I'm not going to worry about the size because that'll be based off of what the art size is. But we do need to up our mass to like 20, and I'm going to go ahead and move it down to where I want it to be, which is going to be right about here. And then we will right click. And then we're going to create an empty and add a sprite renderer component. This is going to be our art. So I'm going to grab my exit sign here and put it here, scale it down to a size that I'm happy with. Then I'll go back up to my sign and edit my collider so it corresponds to the new art. So I get that to where I want it. And then I'm going to move my entire chain so we can see it on the screen. I'm going to move my other chain off the screen for now. And when we press play, we should see some of the chain functionality in action. So we've got our chain here. I'm going to go ahead and exit out of maximize and press play again. And then I'm going to select my sign. And we're going to move our sign a little bit. So see, if I move my sign, it moves. Now it doesn't behave perfectly, but it moves. We can also select our mount and move our mount, which is what I found was the preferred method to get everything to still work correctly. Now do note, if you move it too far, it'll do this kind of thing and it will break. However, if you move it back close, it can't handle certain speeds. Like if you go too fast, it will struggle. But otherwise, you get a cool chain effect. Now the next step is to make it so that we can animate it so we see this chain effect happening, because physics will naturally come to a rest and our chain will stop swaying eventually, as well as making it so we can actually click on it and make the button work correctly. So let's get into that. For that, we're going to need to do some animation and we're going to need to do some scripts. So let's do the script first. So we're going to create a new script. I called mine menu click. It's going to have a reference to an animator and a rigid body. And then we'll say our animator and rigid body is get component. Do note that the animator is looking for a component in their children, whereas the rigid body is looking for a component on itself. Then we're going to make a public function, because this is how buttons work, called, I just named mine on button, on pressed, whatever you want to name it. We're going to set our velocity to 0, so we'll clear any movement, and then we'll call a animation trigger on clicked, which will make an animation occurred that we want. And then I just have it set to load the next level in 1 second. That's all this code right here is doing. So this script is going to go on our sign object. So I'm going to go ahead and attach that to our sign. Then we are going to go to our art for our sign. I'm going to rename it real quick. And we are going to need to make a new animation for it. 1 second. I just messed that up. All right. So we're going to go to our animations folder and open up our menu folder. And then we're going to make a new animation for it. And this animation is what you want the exit sign to do when you click on it. So to make life easy, I'm going to just rotate it a little bit. So I'm going to rotate it like this. Let's make it do a loop-de-doop. Yeah, I like it. All right. We're going to go like that. Something like that. And then we're going to double check. Sometimes loop-de-doops can act weird. This one looks like it's going to play correctly. Sometimes if you do 360, you'll get confused and reverse the last stretch. So you have to make sure that it is moving correctly. All right. After you have your animation set up, you're going to go over to the Animate Tour tab. You're going to create an empty state by just right-clicking, create state, empty. We're going to right-click on that and make it the layer state, the default state, and make you transition from that to our click and a transition back to it. We're going to then add a parameter. All this is explained more in depth in the animation video. I'm going to link it in the top right, but this is just like a quick rushing through it real quick. We're going to add a new parameter. I'm going to call this onClicked. And we are going to play this animation when onClicked is true. And then we will leave this animation after the animation is fully played by setting our exit time to 1 and setting our duration to 0. Our next step is to make sure that our trigger matches. I already know mine does, but just make sure those match. And then we need to create our invisible button. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to go right click UI button. And then you can zoom out a bit. It doesn't matter what type of button you use here since it's going to be an invisible button. So I'm going to make sure to move it. I'm going to disable my other button. I'm going to make sure to move it till it's over my exit sign. Then I will scale it using the T key to get large enough to cover it. Generally, it is advisable to use the rect transform tool as opposed to actual scaling when you're messing with UI elements. I'm going to turn the alpha down of each of these button options, normal, highlighted, pressed, all the way down to 0 once I have it in position. This is going to effectively make this button invisible, which is exactly what we want because we want our art to represent our button. So after we turn all of these down to 0, we are going to attach our script to our sign, our menu click script, and then we are going to go to this on click. We're going to hit the plus and we're going to drag in our sign. And we're going to select from this list, menu click, on button. This will hook up that function to play when we click the button. Then if we press play, what we should see happen is when we click it, our animation plays and the button effect happens. Now the last thing we want to do, and this is optional, but I found it added to the effect, is I applied a slight animation to my mount to have it move over just a little bit. So if I hit play, you can see what it will do. It'll make the chain feel a little bit more alive. So I moved it forward a little bit and then backwards a little bit. So it added some velocity to the chain to help the chain sway. And the degree and speed of which you do it will determine how much the chain moves. So if you just do it slightly, it's not going to move that much. If you do it a lot, the chain's going to sway a lot. And that is, I will show you the setup on the other one. So I don't think we need to animate it again. But I just have an animation that has it move, and then it stays steady, and then it moves again. It's a very simple animation. And that is just put on a loop at a low speed. So it just happens slowly. It gives it a passive effect of the chain moving. Next, I'm going to go into how you might do it so the chain moves and the sign moves forwards and backwards. This is going to be a lot more art heavy. So I have another scene set up for this, and this is all pretty much done by animation. So you do the same stuff as before, where you have a invisible button that is on top of your actual buttons, and that's the button you interact with. You set that up the exact same way. The only difference is instead of having a hinge joint set up, you just make all your art and then you animate it. So I'm gonna press play and you can see my animations. They're not great, but you can see how the chain's kind of bunching up. I only did the first bit because I realized it would take forever to go down the entire chain and have like a ripple effect. And then you would animate the signs so the signs moved looking like it was forwards and backwards. Again, this requires a lot more art, which is not my main wheelhouse, but that is how you would do it. You would have the animation play if you clicked on the button, and then after a short delay so the player can see the animation, you load your level. And then by default, you would just have an empty state that the animator will sit on until it receives that trigger to go into the sign moving back and forth. I hope this answered your question. Please comment in the comments if you need further clarification, and hit the like and subscribe buttons, and I will catch you in the next one.